Yay. All right. I'm going to introduce my friend Vanessa Reed, who is I don't even know what your actual job is. You're like the head of New Music USA, the president,
President and CEO is the official title. Yeah.
Ooh, President and CEO of New Music USA. And I will turn it over to Vanessa and let her run the panel with one last caveat. You got a question for any of the panelists? Please put it in the chat. These people are here to answer questions. They want to hear from you. So please just put it not in the chat, sorry, I said that wrong. Put the comments in the chat, put the questions in the Q&A, same on the bottom next to the raise hand. All right, and we will be here as phantom presences, but Vanessa, take it away.
Thank you, Danny. And I just want to start this panel by saying huge congratulations and thank you to the awesome New Music Gathering team. It's been an incredible kind of what feels like 2 weeks of fascinating discussions, debates, presentations, performances, and we're really thrilled that we are the last panel discussion in the program. So thank you, Angelica, Danny, Yasha, Lainey, Mary, and then Kat, the intern as well. So I would do like a big round of applause if we were in a venue all together. So thank you all. And yeah, we thought it was exactly. And we thought it was a really nice opportunity because the theme of this event, New Music Gathering, has been money. We thought because we've got the last session that it would be interesting to think beyond money and to think about considering the value of other services and opportunities which demonstrate that money on its own is just not always enough, even if it's a pretty essential part of the mix. So that's what we're going to be exploring in this discussion. And I'm joined by three extremely inspiring artists, leaders, thinkers who are all somehow either leading or taking part in programs which add learning, skills development, mentorship, networks, planning to the fact of receiving a grant or a cash bursary. So I'm really excited about this discussion. Thank you all for joining me. I feel really honored to be in this Zoom with you. And to get us going, let's just hear from both of you a few words about who you are. Just introduce yourselves to the New Music Gathering crowd. And I'm just going to go kind of clockwise on my Zoom screen. So Darian, you get to go first.
Oh, wonderful. Hi. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Darian Donovan Thomas. I'm a violinist, composer, filmmaker, photographer, interdisciplinary artist who is currently the artistic associate for New Amsterdam Records and is part of this capacity building program, which I'm very excited to talk about. And I don't know, I guess I love that we've started talking more about money in a very open, transparent way. Because I think that was one of the big barriers to access for a lot of people. And for me, getting new members into our community is so important. But sometimes, it's like, I don't know, does everyone know that they should pay attention to the email from New Music Gathering? And sometimes they don't, but they are definitely the people that should be there. And so I think there's this thing that even Angelica and I have talked about before, where it's like some people just need extra help getting into the room. And I think part of the way of doing that is definitely by talking about money. So I'm excited for us to discuss this. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Darian. I totally agree. And when Darian referenced capacity building program, it's the one that New Music USA is running with New York Community Trust, but you'll hear more about that later. Next up is Christine from Creative Capital. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. So great to be here. Thank you so much, Vanessa and New Music USA. It's a huge honor to be on this panel with all of you. So yes, I just joined Creative Capital 4 months ago as the new president and executive director. And we're really excited to fund musicians as well as all performing artists and visual artists, as well as writers and filmmakers. And so, what we do is obviously provide grants, but we also provide scaffolding and infrastructure support. So really excited to talk more about that tonight. Thank you so much.
Brilliant, Christine, and thank you for being here. Christine is actually not feeling that great, which is why she's got a particularly nice husky voice today. So, so thanks for being here. We really appreciate that. And I'm also wanting to say to everyone listening to this session, I know for a fact that Creative Capital don't get as many applications from music creators as they do from other art forms. So please make sure you listen to what Christine says throughout this session, because I think it's an amazing resource. So last but not least, Jen, do you want to say hi?
Hi, I'm so excited to see everyone here. Vanessa, it's so good to see you. And I'm such fans of Darian and Christine. Creative Capital actually is one of the first resources I share with my people when they ask me about resources, grants, you know, how do I do this and that? And I always just, oh, Creative Capital website, here you go. So that's exciting. And of course, New Music USA. I've been lucky to be with, you know, have been supported by for, gosh, I guess since many years ago. So I'm an artist, also interdisciplinary, mainly vocalist, composer, multi-instrumentalist, and dancer and producer. And I'm representing today, especially the Mutual Mentorship for Musicians initiative, which I co-founded with my dear friend and amazing vocalist, Sara Serpa. And we were also very fortunate to receive a creator-led partnership grant from New Music USA. And we're continuing. We just started our third cohort, and I'll talk more about how it's blossoming. So I'm so honored to be here.
Brilliant. We're honored to have you. So thank you so much. And I just want to dive straight into our conversation now, because we've got about 45 minutes, I think, by the time we've covered questions. And I want to start with Christine and Creative Capital, because you've been around for 20 years as an organization. I remember when I was based in London, I'd heard about the model that Creative Capital was promoting. I'd heard about the kind of residencies and the advice, and I was really intrigued when I found online that, you know, you make a statement somewhere in all of your descriptions, and it might be historical, it might be current, but it says time and advisory services are as important to the creative process as money. And I love the way you kind of combine it all. So can you just tell us about the Creative Capital model and why it was set up, and just share whatever you'd like to about that?
Yes, I would love to talk about that. I think Creative Capital was founded with such a unique concept. As many of you know, we were created in 1999 when the National Endowment for the Arts discontinued a lot of their grant programs for individual artists. And then president of the Warhol Foundation, Archibald Gillies, really believed that individual artists are critical to freedom of expression and critical to our democracy. And so Creative Capital was really set up from the beginning to provide not only funding, but a whole scaffolding and infrastructure so that artists can thrive and succeed and really impact our cultural ecosystem. So hand in hand with that, along with advisory services and networking and financial guidance and all kinds of things that we provide our awardees, we also run a series of workshops that are open to the public. We've served over 30,000 artists over the last 20 plus years. And many of the artists say that the grant from Creative Capital transformed their lives, not just their career, but just the way they think about their practice and how they can impact their communities. So that's really a fundamental part of how we operate. And one of the unique things about our grant program is it's open call, it's national, and it's project funding. So we're always looking for innovative, groundbreaking projects. So if you have a great musical project that you want to submit, we're opening our next round of applications in the spring. We would love to see it. And we use a whole peer system of evaluation, which is external reviewers. So it's not by nomination. It's not like you have to know somebody at Creative Capital. It is purely a democratic process. So from soup to nuts, it's a very innovative model. And we're really excited to work with all of you to build on that and to improve our services for musicians in particular.
Brilliant. And it's interesting because you share some, you know, common characteristics with New Music USA grants, like the external peer panel, the project focus, etc. But I think your bursaries are pretty generous, aren't they? What's the size of the financial amount that you would give out?
Yeah, so we give out grants up to $50,000 per artist, and it was 35 awards per year prior to my joining, and we now have board approval to give 50 awards a year. So going forward, we've just increased the direct funding to artists by 40%. So yes, hopefully that reaches a lot of you and reaches a lot of performing artists and musicians. And yeah, we're really excited about that.
Brilliant. And I guess I want to come to this later, but because, you know, the idea of giving 50,000 grants, $50,000 worth grants is quite a big responsibility. And I'm guessing that in a way, that's why there's that real impetus to make sure that money has the most value it can, as you said, for the ecosystem, but and also for that individual artist. So I want to come back later, and I'm just planting the seed for all of you, and also for anyone who's listening. I'd love us to think kind of on the flip side about instances when you might have actually received some money, but you didn't put it to good use because you didn't get that support structure around you. Because I think that's a good way of kind of thinking about what added value brings. But thank you for sharing that amazing news, and we'll be
thank you, Vanessa,
somewhere on our social media as well. So thank you. And Jen, your program model, it's very new. So compared to Creative Capital has had decades, you're a new model that you've led with Sarah as two artists, kind of in a way using your knowledge of what you need as an artist to develop a new framework. So tell us all about how that works in terms of small amounts of cash and then everything else it brings.
Right, absolutely. So I'm actually going to drop our link right into the chat so you can browse while I'm talking. So indeed, last year when Sarah and I started brainstorming, it was March 2020, and it was, of course, we were kind of panicked. All of our gigs had disappeared, but we were really thinking about, well, what about our fellow colleagues, especially our women and non-binary underrepresented colleagues in our scene, which is already kind of in the margins of creative music, as a lot of us here are in creative and new music. So we started brainstorming. I had always wanted to embark on a mentorship program somehow, and over the course, I guess since 2017, was really thinking of what kind of model would work. At first I was thinking, if you mentor someone, then someone will mentor you. I thought of this infinite ladder, but then I thought, well, how would that hierarchy even work? So then I kind of threw that out the window, because, you know, even if you're an older artist doesn't mean that you're more experienced, or if you're a younger artist, you might have a lot more experience than, you know, so we wanted to actually have an intergenerational cohort of artists, and we chose the number 12 a little bit randomly, but it turns out that's such a good number for pairings, for trio, quartet, and we really just gathered first. Our first cohort was just friends that we thought really deserved more attention, and in terms of their work and you know, themselves as great artists. And our age range, I think, ranged from 19 to mid 60s of our artists, and we offered at first, for our first cohort, a very small amount, $750 for each person to just be within our cohort for 6 months. And we realized, well, you know, we really need more funding, we need support. So you know, our first cohort was actually funded by an angel donor who just was a fan of mine and wanted to support, but we thought, okay, we need to find a more sustainable model. So we then we thought, well, what if we could talk to some institutions? And we talked to you at New Music USA, and we were able to up our funding to 1,000. And and so we've created a budget. We have received some future funding. I'm not allowed to announce it yet, but we are able to then offer our next cohort 1,500. So our plan is to just increase it by 500 every 6 months. And because that is one of our goals, is that people in this program should receive a good amount of money for creating a piece with another person in our cohort. So it is a commissioning, it's more than a commissioning kind of fellowship. We have these meetings twice a month with the whole group, and the duos who are randomly paired at the first meeting, they meet on their own, and they create a piece about 4.5 months into the program. And they also leave behind a writing, an essay, or it could be a poem or a chart of one's composition and process. So they also leave that behind in an anthology that we also publish. So we're still working on the model. The selection process is always a work in progress, it seems. So just hearing Christine talk about, the open call, we have like half open call, half nomination model happening now. So we have an open call. We accept 6 from that open call, and then from our nominations, each previous cohort member nominates 1 artist, and we choose 6 from there. So we're still, everything's changing. So
amazing that you've achieved so much so early. And I think for me, what I'm hearing you talk about makes me feel that you don't recognize the incredible value, and I'm deliberately using these words, value, of
yes.
everything else you're bringing to that program apart from the money. And
Exactly.
based on some of my experience, when I was in the UK, when I've run programs like this, the participants have actually said the other stuff was more valuable than the actual money. So have you
Yes.
had any of that? I mean, because you're curating an amazing framework of opportunity.
Exactly.
So I'm guessing you've already started to have that kind of feedback.
Oh, yes. And I do want to share this beautiful piece that Frank actually compiled for us. And it's just some short essays of feedback from our first cohort on their experience in being part of this community, and a lot of you can read the beautiful words, but it was kind of life-giving, so essential, to, especially in that period when there was we were just at a loss of what to do next, where to go from here, and some of our cohort members really doubting their future in especially those who are more emerging. So it was really powerful, and then to create something at the same time was also life-giving. As we know that creating art as creators, it is life-giving. So yeah, I mean, I can't really say enough about all the benefits of just we've gotten our meetings have become oftentimes very personal. Sometimes we're focused on one artist's kind of a dilemma, and we all kind of contribute to helping that artist. And other times we're talking about like, what does success mean to us, and everyone having a different story. And it's been very moving. I cry at every meeting inevitably, but it's so beautiful, and I think it's really necessary, especially in this particular time, but I think beyond as well.
Absolutely. And Christine's just put in the chat that often the feedback at Creative Capital is that community of artists is the most valuable element. So let's hear from Darian, another artist perspective, although you're also wearing the hat of artist associate with New Amsterdam Records in our program. But just for those of you who don't know about it, it's 10 nonprofits based in New York. So we're working with a New York funder. Each one is getting $10,000 as a grant, but then there's a kind of cohort learning program, which is to help the organizations really use that money well and also have these connections. But Darian, I'd love to hear your thoughts, I guess, from both of those perspectives around what you're hoping to get out of that experience and what you hope to learn from it.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, so I kind of feel like I'm in a funny situation where I definitely told myself I wouldn't do any more arts admin after like a couple years ago. I had a arts admin job when I first moved to New York 3 years ago, and it was great. Everyone was great. But I realized like, oh, that's not what I should be doing. But it did feel sad coming out of that because I felt like I was in a bit of a nebulous space, and I was like, okay, I have to rebuild this like community again for myself and like refoster a bunch of relationships. And now coming into NewAm, it's felt, I don't know, really sort of like a homecoming. So I've been listening to the things put out on NewAm for a really long time, like since high school. And it's part of the reason why I moved to, I mean, talk about community. Part of the reason I knew to move to Bushwick and learn like of the neighborhood Bushwick and Brooklyn and Red Hook was because of like researching the artists on the label. And I realized like, oh, all the composers that started this thing are in Brooklyn, and like I want to be like them and around people like that. And in an environment where any given show you go to is going to be of like-minded people, maybe not like of the same aesthetic, but people who are trying to experiment with similar things. So I moved here, and then I was able to go through the Comp Lab program, the NewAm Comp Lab, which is like this really beautiful thing for artists, composers, performer composers, where you just get a bunch of us together and we talk about being post-genre or genre fluid. What exactly are we experimenting with? We can show each other some works and get into like real philosophical conversations. Fortunately, I was in this lab right as I moved to New York from Texas. And now I'm in a duo called Media Queer with Fong Tran. If any of y'all know his work, it's remarkable. I met him through the Comp Lab. So I'm like in bands that are doing things. We both went to Banglewood together and stuff, but it's like from the experience of community building that came from NewAm. And so knowing all this, knowing that I cared about the institution of the label, but also knowing that like the composers who started it, William Patel and Judd Greenstein and Sarah Kirkland Snyder, they're all fully emerged, post-emerge, and like very much in the field. They're also all parents, and like when I was contacted for the position, we just had a really frank talk, which was nice. Judd called me and was like, hey, so you're out doing a bunch of stuff. We love that. We kind of can't be out doing a bunch of stuff even before the pandemic just because we have kids, and like we have our jobs we're just like doing a bit more heavy lifting at this point, so we can't just be in the field as much, and we don't want that. We know that can lead to some things atrophying, and therefore we were wondering if you would be interested in participating with us and like coming on board. Not really, like there will be some admin things to do, but also a big part of it is just that you're in the field and that you're just like, working with so many bands and touring and like meeting people, and you can keep us up to date with like what's happening out in the world. And I was like, yes, absolutely, I would love that. And now being on the admin side and being in this type of program, it's like, oh, cool. So then what does this mean? How can I spread this to other people? And how can I bring other people into the label the same way that I was brought into it and make them feel like here's not just like a label that you can send music to, even though we love that and that's great, but here is a community very factually, very directly that you can join, even around the country, and now like in a bunch of instances around the world. It's just a network of people who are somewhat like-minded. And so I think through the capacity building like program, and through the monetary amount, of course, and through like being able to talk through some of these like what I guess growing pains of like being an institution that's at different stages of one's life, right? Because the other organizations in it are all of different ages. It's exciting to feel like, oh, this is kind of like the Comp Lab again, but like in a new, like further along context, where here are people that I get to just have conversations with. Here are people where I get to talk about very real things that school didn't prepare me for, like never prepares any of us for. And here are times where I get to talk to people at different stages of their career about how we're all tackling the same problems. And I don't know. Yeah, I love that. I love that it's not just a monetary thing. Like, there's a lot of power to being given money, but there's even more power to being guided then of like, here's not even just here's the way to use it, but here are some questions we can ask that maybe help all of us understand how to make all these things stretch much further.
Absolutely. And I think you've all got in common the fact that your budgets are less than 250,000. But as you're saying, otherwise, there's some organizations that have been around forever. There's some very new organizations like Die Jim Crow Records, which is the other label, which is working with incarcerated musicians and formerly incarcerated musicians. So it's a very interesting mix. Out of interest, how many of those people do you already know, Darian?
I think I already knew like 3 or 4.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's always a hope that in all of these programs, like a creative capital kind of meetup, or in your program, Jen, that there are like new connections, because we're ultimately all about, as you were saying, Darian, like how we spread it to other people, how we build community and kind of strengthen the whole ecosystem. So yeah, it's great that you're part of that, and it's like a follow-up to the other lab that you were part of. That's great. I didn't know that, so that's cool. And coming back to Christine, I'm interested in the fact that obviously Darian and Jen are both interdisciplinary artists, and Creative Capital is across all art forms. It's not a music funder like New Music USA is. So is there anything that you can share about what you see in terms of trends or differences or similarities when it comes to the way people engage with your programs and the feedback you get? And also coming back to that point, you know, do we know why there are less music creators coming to Creative Capital, etc.?
Well, I think there are a lot of musicians that are receiving grants, but it may be in partnership or in collaboration with other types of art forms. So a lot of what we fund is genre stretching work and, you know, sort of risk-taking work. And I was just looking at our roster of awardees, and, you know, we fund opera, we fund composition, we fund musical theater, jazz, and so many other forms. And so I think musicians are scattered throughout the awardees. We have over 750 awardees. One thing that I think we're all seeing, and I think the pandemic is bringing this out, is artists really share a lot of the same needs for services. So what we've heard from artists is, you know, in addition to the funding, you know, strategic planning, financial guidance, but also the essentials that all people need, healthcare, childcare, you know, just kind of basic fundamental things that artists really need. And so I think that's what we're seeing. And it's very interesting what artists have told us from the funding and the services that we provide, is that many of them have actually been able to buy real estate. Housing is a big issue, but also buying studio space and buying performing arts venues, and being able to really invest in their long-term careers and invest in their practice. And I think that's something that we're really proud of, being able to offer that kind of guidance. Just today, we had an awardee reach out to return money, because with the strategic planning and the financial planning services that we provided, the artist was able to accomplish the project for less than what they had originally budgeted. So all of this is really, really heartening. And I think artists really feel empowered when they have access to these kinds of services.
And because we're talking about that sort of almost investor-artist relationship, do you at Creative Capital think there's anything we can learn from startups in the commercial world, or even artists who are kind of individual startups in a more commercial genre, if you like?
Yes, I think that really goes to the heart of our thinking. The model that Ruby Lerner, our founding director, created was really a venture philanthropy model, where we provide sort of the seed funding, we provide infusions of cash and community and education as part of that journey. And the infusions of cash come at strategic moments in a project's life cycle, so that the cash really makes a difference. So going back to one of your questions, Vanessa, about the projects that we like to see, we really are interested in projects that are groundbreaking and that are at catalytic moments in an artist's career. So we don't just provide funding to premiere or to perform. It's really got to be something catalytic. And that's kind of like a startup philosophy in that sense. But we also encourage awardees to give back, not only to creative capital, but also to their local communities. We've had artists go on who've done really well and bring this model to a lot of their other work, and also to build bridges for their communities locally. So one thing I did want to mention is more than 75% of our awardees in recent years are BIPOC artists. And we're really committed to funding artists of color in every genre. So that's another thing that I think is really transformative about our grant.
Thanks, Christine. That's really helpful. And that's the kind of interesting segue to talking to Jen about your approach to curation, because it's curating the group of people who are supported. You've deliberately focused on women, non-binary, historically underrepresented, intergenerational. So are you seeing or getting feedback about the value that that brings to the group's experience?
Absolutely. And I am happy to just kind of paste our copy and paste our criteria just to see kind of what we're looking at. And you know, I think a big one that maybe doesn't get talked a lot about is access to resources. And we really, when we are, you know, going through everyone's applications and thinking about who would benefit the most, you know, from being in a cohort and being in this mutual mentorship model, we're really thinking about those who really just don't have a lot of access. This third cohort, we were so happy to hear from an Indonesian artist. She's from Medan in Sumatra, and you know, really isolated. And she's incredible, you know, this vocalist and sound artist. And you know, it was really striking to hear her work, and just we were amazed that, you know, we know that she's not in a New York, you know, artist-centric place. She's like pretty alone out there. And so we're really thinking about access, really thinking about representation, and also artists like say that they might be more from the contemporary classical world and really are starting as a composer. You know, so we I don't know, Rebecca Heller is in our third cohort, and you know, amazing artist, and she's just starting to be a composer, you know, to call herself a composer and really claim that, and that's exciting, you know, it's exciting to us. And so we're really thinking about who could benefit most from being you know, just in conversation and brainstorming with all of us in all of these meetings. And so yeah, and also location, of course. We want to have folks who are not just, you know, on the East Coast or have access to a big city. So yeah, all those things we're thinking about. And I think what's unique about our model is really about the mutuality, about non-hierarchical learning. You know, I was paired myself with Sumi Tanoka, who is an incredible pianist, mainly in the jazz world. And, you know, we'd have conversations about, you know, she would ask my help with, you know, what about social media and this technology stuff, you know, and you know, it was so mutual that it really, those kind of borders and lines are really, they kind of disintegrate, and that's our hope. And yeah, so, and just the crossing, and not just our pairs, but all the artists in the cohort, now they're collaborating and kind of also in their own worlds, in their own circles, kind of replicating the model, at least in support. And so in our future, we hope, I hope this is okay, Sarah, that I'm saying this, but our dream is to like have, you know, each of our cohort members then be able to, if we can get the funding, be able to have their own, you know, to administer or to, you know, kind of head their own cohort. And so it's exponentially growing, and that's the big dream. So
that
yeah.
sounds amazing. And you're basically creating very safe, powerful spaces for this new connection. Yes. Knowing that everyone is sharing something with regards where they are in their career or how much access they've had or haven't had. So that's
exactly
why it's being so powerful. I mean, I think it's so important that, you know, it's an artist-led initiative, because you can kind of identify what the problems are and then, you know, help show institutions how to start kind of addressing them. So I'm wondering, Darian, I mean, do you have any other thoughts on what you'd like to see more of coming from funders and service organizations? What kinds of things aren't there that should be there?
Right, yeah. Such wonderful big questions. I mean, I think that I love that a lot of conversations are happening at the moment, especially after the year that we just had. It seems to spark a lot of dialogue that's important. And I've noted that a lot of changes have occurred because of that, and a lot more people are using more of the vocabulary that needs to be used, and that's really great. And I personally think it's a good thing, even if it seems like, I know for me personally, it felt kind of like last year everyone remembered Black composers exist, and that's just, you know, a thing that happens in these world shift moments. And I, instead of being very annoyed by that, I'm just like, well, I mean, the opportunity is there. I'm going to take the job, and I'm also going to refer all of my friends who can take the job, because I know that we all can do remarkable work with these resources that are now becoming available. But I think the next step of that is definitely understanding that the process isn't one size fits all. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier, and a clarification is probably important. When I was saying, like, we don't all know that an email from New Music Gathering is important, I don't mean that, like, we don't all know that within the new music community. I think everyone in the new music community knows that. But I would wonder, for someone that's out in Singapore and not a part of the new music community in New York, would you know that, like, oh, you got this email from this institution, you have to respond? Like, I think that's where, and then if you don't know and then you miss a deadline, is it really just of us to reprimand you and take away these resources because you missed out on, you know what I mean? So I think that there's like a bit of care and grace and fluidity that has to happen, which I also feel like should be just as obvious based on this last year as like inclusion of BIPOC voices, inclusion of like anyone non-cis male. All of this work is like very important, but I think the grace is too, because we understand that like at any given moment the world could stop again. And I'm presently nervous about like a lot of the tours that I have to go on in like a couple months, because I'm just like, that's a lot of money that I really hope happens, but I also understand that I could just lose my job again, you know? And it's real, like it's coming from a very real place now. And I think being at the intersection of like new music with all of our institutions that give funding and the way that we go about that, but then also like the pop world with all the bands, and like we just get money if you show up to the gig or not, and not everyone's graceful enough to still pay you if the gig gets canceled on their end. I guess I would just hope that there's more understanding of that process, you know, and of the fact that other people don't know that this is how it goes, and there's merit to really walking someone through a process, not like condescending or belittling at all. But I think also like everyone in the field is responsible and mature enough to not do that, to know like how to talk to someone and guide them through things, and like, yeah, just be really transparent, right? I think that's really what I want to see, because it seems like we're opening the doors up to let more people in. But then there's the thing of like, once people come in though, how are we going to help them acclimate to the environment that they just weren't in before? You know?
That's a really, really strong point. And I think, you know, we talked about catalytic moments in people's career, and I mean, in previous roles, we've always, when I've been working on anything to do with artist development, it's always about trying to make sure you're giving an artist support at a time when it's really going to make a difference, not too early, not too late, making sure it's absolutely transparent and fair. But I'm wondering on that subject whether any of you can think of ideas where, in a sense, you've received some kind of financial support, perhaps without the care or thought that needs to go into the grant maker's mind in terms of why you're getting that money at that point. Because obviously when there are opportunities, everyone wants to try and get support, and we receive about 1,500 applications often every year, and we've only got around 150 grants. So I guess there's that question about, is it dangerous to get money at the wrong time? Because quite often you get it once and then you can't get it the following year or whatever. So I'm just interested to know if you've ever actually experienced that or observed it happening elsewhere. I mean, Christine, do you ever, I mean, I'm guessing you evaluate all of your programs, so there must be some that don't work out as well as some projects that don't work out as well as the others. And is that to do with?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, and I'm sure everyone else has thoughts about this. I mean, I think in general, I would say there's never enough funding for artists. We always want to give more money to artists. Creative Capital receives over 44,000 applications a year, and we give out 50 grants, and that's an increase from where we were at 35. So that's 1%. So it's we really would love to be able to give out more. We would love to have more grants to give artists. There are circumstances where some artists change the project. So they apply with a project, they get the grant, and they decide to evolve the project in a different direction. But we always try to work with the artists to figure out if those grant funds are still applicable and can still be used in some way. We also have artists who realize that they actually have more funding than they need, and they're happy to give back and allow another artist to take those funds. All of our funding also goes to educational programming, professional development workshops, and a lot of what we do is pay what you wish. So it really helps to support those artists who can't afford to take our professional development workshops. So yeah, we always want to try to give more money to artists.
Likewise, yeah. Jen?
Yeah, I definitely wanted to give a shout out to Creative Capital because, their strategic planning is that the resources they offer are so amazing. And I also wanted to give a shout out to the MAP Fund, the SPA program, which is, I'm going to put the link right in here, but I'm trying to think of your question specifically, Vanessa, of a time when I didn't use the money well, but I think just that came into my mind immediately was how something did work really well, and that was with the MAP Fund, and they, at the time when I received the grant, I think it was 2015, they not only gave me funds, but they also had me work with a kind of an angel consultant named David Scheingold, who you might have heard his name, but we, over the course of 2 years or 3 years, we had these meetings maybe once every 7 months, and they were 2 hours long, and I'd never received this kind of one-on-one kind of counsel, advice before, and and this was so essential because I'd never just had someone so focused on the short-term and long-term projects that I had, and kind of the small dreams and the huge dreams. And one of the best pieces of advice that he gave me on this 50-state tour that I was doing, that was kind of hugely way beyond my mind at that time, he said, Jen, just start like the low-hanging fruit. Just start slow, start small, and just go from there, instead of trying to imagine the whole thing at one time, the low-hanging fruit. And that's just an example of one jewel that they gave me, but that very much, that kind of one-on-one that came along with that grant, I thought that was such a gift, and I think that was the first time I'd received that kind of support from a grant.
And that
So
one relationship generated so much additional value by the sounds of it, that's kind of continued with subsequent projects and
yes,
coaches.
absolutely, and was kind of a seed for part of our N3 of thinking about, you know, how we wanted these duo mentorship, you know, of course, two-way in this sense, but how we imagined that. So yeah, that was an essential piece of N3, actually, just having gone through that. So
thank you, Jen, for sharing that. That's a really powerful story. I'm just looking at the Q&A box because I think Danny is welcoming everyone to send their questions in if you have any. So please do. I think this is where Danny's voice appears, and he says,
Danny's voice is here. Please send in your. I couldn't find the button. Please do. Hey, there I am. Please do put your questions in. This is an invaluable situation to be talking to all these people in one go. So, and they are here to help you get money and beyond for your projects, to help grow your projects. I don't care if you're like, you know, just going to your undergraduate right now, or you're like 82 right now. These are people who are going to their job, their actual job is to help you. So ask some questions, get some help. It's free.
I do have another thing to add, gently. Well, I guess because I care a lot about like gentleness and grace and care, but we're talking about all these things where the creation of community comes from institution, I guess, which is like really important and beautiful, and I love that that's happening. But also don't forget that you can create it yourself, and the internet's really strong. This maybe works better for people who are more in tune with what social media can do and whatnot, but like I personally know that if people reach out to me on Instagram or something and they're just like, I'm from Texas, I just I don't know, saw something with Moses Sumney or something, and they find me and then message me, I definitely will talk to them. And I've been talking with like a couple of cool composers in different parts of the country who are just like, what should I do? Should I go to grad school? Should I blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, I love these conversations. I will happily talk to you about it. If you haven't taken a gap year, no, take a gap year. If you have, then yeah, sure, whatever, Matt. You know, just these things where just remember that like people, I'm of the opinion that a lot of people want you to win and like it's really okay. And you can just talk to people and ask them for things. And maybe someone knows one of the other panelists here and they're like, oh, you should talk to this person when you're ready. And also people are really good at gauging when it's funny. I think actually like giving people money at the wrong time isn't as dangerous as maybe like putting a connection to a person at the wrong time. That feels like way more wasteful. Like I if I were to meet someone at the wrong time and I'm like in high school and not capable of actually like really having a conversation with someone yet, then that makes it a little hard and I just have to wait, you know, like 6 years and then come back and try again. Um so I think like the people around me anyway, and from hearing other people's stories, like people are really good at gauging when you should be talking to someone and when you should have that coffee date with someone and just go and take 10 pages of notes like I did with Angelica when I first moved here. It's yeah, just remember that like there's a lot of power in autonomy and like all of us are very capable of doing this. And then the institutions get to come in and like help us when that needs to get to another level, which usually happens when we're ready to reach that point, you know, at that catalytic point. So just remember that.
That's a great point, Darian. Thanks. And obviously, Jen's program is an example of an artist-led, an artist-facilitated community, which, you know, is totally independent of any funder. So I think I totally agree. And we've got some questions coming in. So have you had mentors outside of granting organizations, venues, or patrons? So this is you, I mean, in a way, people are finding you on Instagram, Darian, you're engaging in that community with peer artists. And any other points about where you found your mentors?
Yeah, totally. I have had so many new music parents at this point. Like fully call Adam Tindler my new music dad, but as well as like Bill Bertel, and like I don't know, all these people are very much so important, and Helika is very much so critical. And I guess the thing that makes these people mentors is like, for me, first off, it was that I cared about the art, right? And like knew that I could hear through it that there was something that we could relate on, I guess, in a deeper level. And then through just being around, being at the shows, and like gently, not aggressively, not creepily, but gently coming to talk to people at their shows and presentations, like these friendships started to blossom. And I don't know, it just all happens very comfortably, and then all of a sudden you're having this very honest conversation about race in new music, about money in new music, about funding a tour in which like everything went wrong, about all these experiences. And I think once you get to that point of trust and that point of honesty, where I know like if I ever have something that's like really thorny, I can come to these people, then you get to that, you know that you found your mentors, right? And they're also
Triggered
wonderful
a whole debate about the term new music parent in the chat, which is kicking off in a nice way right now. We've got a gentle reminder that we've only got 10 minutes. So there's another question which I want to ask to Jen, which is for those of you who are multitasking, how do you balance what you give in hopes to support the work of others with what you need to do your own work? And obviously, you know, you've been doing some big new projects of your own, which I had the pleasure to see at Roulette as well, you know, but so
thank you.
but tell us how do you balance that?
Yeah, I'd love to hear from Darian too. I know about this, but wow, I actually the question before I also wanted to get to as well about mentors and you know, outside of institutions. But yeah, multitasking, it's an endless balancing. And you know, for sure, I've never logged the hours that I've worked for M3, but I think it's at least a full-time job. And so yeah, that's about organization. I'm thinking of the Creative Capital Strategic Planning booklet where they have you log, you know, for 2 weeks, you have to keep track of how much time you spend on everything, and you realize, you can actually really improve upon your time management. So, so yeah, it's tough. I think a lot of it for me, it really depends on what kind of planner you are, what kind of person you are, but I have to plan ahead. If I don't book a time for myself in the calendar, like composing me time, then it will not get done. Because I think my automatic is to go toward, oh, I want to do, you know, more for these artists. I want to call this artist back, and I want to write this recommendation letter for this artist. And so that's kind of where I want to go. And so I really need to be disciplined about scheduling my own Gen time, creative time. So yeah, it really depends on your way of working. And to speak about mentors, I feel like one big reason why Sarah and I wanted to create M3 was because of when we entered mainly the jazz world, creative music world, on that side of things, it was so hard for us as women, as non-men, to get access to the elders. And I've been very lucky. I've been able to manage, you know, to talk with these, you know, elders, male elders in our world. But even our, you know, Jerry Allen and Cassandra Wilson and Abby Lincoln, you know, it was really hard to have a conversation with them. And so we hoped, you know, because they were superstars, or it just was really intimidating. So our hope with creating M3 is just to kind of break down those barriers and to just kind of make that access so much easier. And yeah, I mean, I think in the jazz world, it's, you know, you have to be the girlfriend of the musician in order to talk to this person, you know. So that is something we really wanted to tackle and confront with our program. So yeah, I hope that's helpful.
That goes back to that incredible value of really deliberately putting people together who wouldn't already know each other, which also plays out in terms of, you know, envisioning what we want to achieve at New Music USA, which is a kind of inclusive and equitable ecosystem for new music that isn't only open to the people who've got the friend who knows the friend who knows the friend. That's really great that you're doing that. I think we're going to have to wrap up in a moment. I want to make sure that you give everyone any essential info they need about how to get involved in your work. So Jen, Christine, like when are the next, you've mentioned already, but remind us of the next deadlines. Darian, I mean, anyone who wants to contact NewAm, what do they do? You know, can you give us a quick soundbite on that?
Or you could put it in the chat too, if that's easier for you. Emails, if you want to hear from people, you know, it's an intense but timid asking group, but I feel like you probably have questions about these things. So I'm sure these people would be more than happy to chat with you further beyond this. That's sort of the idea. Does anybody have any further questions? Lainey says, what do I do? It's a good question. I don't know if we have time for that one. All right, so there's emails flying. Hey, I want to just thank everybody in this panel. This has been super informative and super helpful to me. I'm just going to be selfish and say I learned a lot. I'm sure you did too. But that's, you know, that's why I'm here. But really, New Music Gathering thanks you all for your time and your expertise and your new music parenting, which we all need, especially now. And just the term new music parenting is just, I'm going to take it very seriously. Darian has a rehearsal to go to, but I want to thank you all again. And yeah, oh, Mary is telling you the most important thing. We got one more concert, 8 p.m. Central Time, which is, just to point out, 9 o'clock New York time, because we've been having this problem here. And then please come to Gathertown afterward. You can find it at the top of your schedule on the New Music Gathering page. We will all be there. We're fun. We're interesting people. You can it's like moving around in a 8-bit game and chatting with each other in public and private places. Should be great. It's the closest we're going to come to an after party in the virtual space, but you can actually have reasonable conversations. I met Shoshana Klein, who's in this panel somewhere. We had a nice chat. Just she and I closing a bar together. It was really fantastic. So anyway, have a great rest of your night, and we will see you all at 8 o'clock Central Time.
Tell the Bergamots I said hi.
Thank you.
Love them.
Thank
We
you.
will.
Beautiful. Yay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.